The story of Millionaire invited the black cleaning lady as a joke, but Seichi showed up like a diva and everyone. Begins on a warm Friday morning in the Grand Silverstone Estate, one of the richest properties in all of Los Angeles. The estate belonged to Maxwell Hartfield, a billionaire who loved two things: money and attention. He loved to host giant parties in his golden ballroom, filled with crystal lights, white marble floors, and fountains that sparkled like diamonds. But he also loved something else, something much darker. He loved humiliating people he thought were beneath him. And the person he enjoyed mocking the most was Grace Milton, the 37-year-old cleaning lady who worked quietly in the house every day. Grace was a black woman with soft brown eyes, short curly hair, and a gentle way of speaking that made people feel calm. But Maxwell never looked at her like a human being. To him, she was just someone who cleaned toilets and dusted his statues. He never asked about her life. He never wondered how she carried herself with such dignity even when treated like heir. Grace had worked in the mansion for nearly 3 years. She was always polite. She always kept her head down. But what people didn't know was that Grace was not weak. She was not afraid. She simply waited. She waited for the day she would no longer need to hide who she really was. She waited for the day the truth would be too loud to ignore. That day arrived sooner than she expected, hidden inside a golden envelope that Maxwell dropped on the counter with a smirk. "Grace," he said loudly, so his visiting friends could hear. "Tomorrow night is my grand charity gala. Black tie. Maximum elegance. I know you don't have anything fancy, but hey, try your best." His friends burst into laughter. One of them whispered, "Maybe she'll show up wearing curtains." Another said, "If she even dares to show up." Maxwell leaned closer, pretending to be kind. "Grace, you are invited. I want everyone from the Hartfield household to be there. Even the staff." Grace felt the sting behind his words. She knew he expected her to stay home out of embarrassment. She knew he thought she was too poor to find a dress. She knew he was planning something cruel. But she also knew something Maxwell did not. Grace Milton had once lived in a world far grander than the Silverstone estate. And Maxwell Hartfield had no idea that the cleaning lady he mocked carried a past powerful enough to shatter his entire empire. As Maxwell walked away laughing, Grace picked up the envelope and smiled. Not a weak smile, but a secretive one. Something in her chest awakened. Something she had buried for years. Something that whispered, "It's time." The next morning, while the mansion buzzed with party decorators and caterers, Grace stood quietly in her tiny apartment, holding the invitation in her hands. She had lived there for 2 years, a small second-floor unit in a quiet neighborhood where no one asked questions and no one noticed when she rushed off to work before sunrise. She sat on her bed, staring at the old suitcase she kept hidden under it. She pulled it out slowly, like someone touching a memory that hurt and healed at the same time. Inside, wrapped in white cloth, was a gown. A breathtaking deep blue gown with silver beads along the waist and soft silk that shimmered like moonlight. It was the kind of dress princesses wore in fairy tales. Grace ran her hand across it, feeling the history inside every thread. This dress had belonged to her mother, Evelyn Kingsley, a woman full of fire and elegance who had once danced in royal halls. Real royal halls, not the fake, shallow gatherings Maxwell hosted. Evelyn was not just anyone. She had been the secretly wedded wife of Charles Kingsley, one of the wealthiest and most respected men in the country, a man whose estate made Maxwell's mansion look like a toy house. Grace was their daughter, the only daughter. But when Grace was 15, Charles died suddenly, and his powerful family turned against Evelyn, claiming she was just a mistake he made. They cut the mother and daughter off completely, hiding them from the world, stealing their inheritance, and erasing their names from every record. Grace remembered the lawyers. She remembered the lies. She remembered the years of silence that followed. After Evelyn passed away, Grace changed her last name and disappeared from high society, choosing peace over fighting a war alone. But now, as she lifted her mother's dress, she realized peace was no longer what she wanted. Maxwell's cruelty had lit a fire inside her. The Kingsley blood in her refused to stay quiet. She put the dress against her body and looked in the mirror. For the first time in years, She saw a woman who didn't belong in a cleaning uniform. She saw a woman who belonged among diamonds and chandeliers. Not because of money, but because of dignity. Grace whispered, "Mama, I hope you're with me tomorrow." And for the first time since she had been forced out of her old life, she felt ready to reclaim her identity, not with anger, but with unshakable calm. As she laid the gown on her bed, her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. She opened it and froze. It said, "We're ready. Tomorrow night." Grace smiled. Yes. Tomorrow would not be a humiliation. It would be a reckoning. Saturday night arrived like a storm waiting to break. The Silverstone estate glowed with golden lights, fountains bursting high into the air, and luxury cars lined up at the entrance. Inside, Maxwell greeted guests with fake warmth, posing for photos with celebrities, politicians, and business giants. Everyone looked perfect, like dolls dressed in diamonds. The orchestra played softly in the background, and waiters moved gracefully through the crowd with glasses of sparkling champagne. Maxwell stood in the center of the ballroom when one of his friends whispered, "Do you think the cleaning lady will actually come?" Maxwell laughed loudly. "Grace, please." She probably didn't even understand the invitation. The group erupted in cruel laughter. But then, the doors of the ballroom opened, and silence fell. A single gasp echoed through the hall. Grace Milton entered slowly, stepping onto the marble floor with the poise of a queen returning to her throne. Her dress shimmered under the chandeliers. Her hair was styled in a perfect updo. She wore subtle silver earrings and soft makeup that made her look timeless. She walked like someone born into royalty, not like someone who cleaned floors hours ago. People stared. People whispered. People froze mid-sentence. Maxwell blinked, confused, then horrified. Is that Grace?" he whispered. She walked through the hall with her head held high, every step soft and steady. She didn't look nervous. She didn't look embarrassed. She looked powerful. A woman nearby whispered, "Where did she get that dress?" Another said, "It must be borrowed." And a third murmured, "She looks expensive." Maxwell tried to laugh, but it sounded shaky. Well, look who showed up." Grace stopped in front of him, her face calm. "You invited me," she said softly. "I didn't want to disappoint you." Some guests chuckled under their breath, expecting Maxwell to mock her again. But something about Grace's voice, quiet, confident, unshaken, made Maxwell uneasy. Very uneasy. He forced a smile. "Well, I hope you enjoy the party. It must be overwhelming for someone like you." Grace tilted her head. "Someone like me?" Maxwell smirked. "You know, someone who isn't used to elegance." Grace smiled, slowly, serenely, dangerously. "Oh, Maxwell, you have no idea what I'm used to." The orchestra continued playing, but the air shifted. People could feel something brewing. Something big. Something that would change everything before the night was over. The moment Maxwell tapped his glass and called everyone for attention, the ballroom filled with curious eyes. He stood in the center, smiling like a villain in a movie. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said loudly, "I want to introduce our special guest tonight, Grace Milton, our cleaning lady." Laughter erupted. It echoed through the golden hall like a cruel wave. Phones came out. Cameras flashed. People whispered jokes. But Grace didn't shrink. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She stood straighter. She looked calmer. Her eyes held something no one understood yet, a storm waiting for its moment. Maxwell grinned, proud of himself. "Grace, tell us, where did you get that dress? A thrift store? A movie costume shop?" Grace lifted the microphone slowly. "This dress belonged to my mother," she said softly. People snickered. "She wore it the last time she danced in a ballroom like this." "Your mother!" a woman shouted. "Was she a maid too?" Grace smiled. "No. She was Evelyn Kingsley." Gasps filled the room. Maxwell's smile vanished. The whispers spread like wildfire. Evelyn Kingsley? That name sounds familiar. Wasn't she married to? No. She disappeared years ago. Grace continued calmly. My mother was the legal wife of Charles Kingsley. And I, she paused, letting silence hold every mind still, am their only daughter. A glass shattered on the floor. Maxwell stumbled backward. That's impossible. You're lying, he shouted. But Grace reached into her purse and lifted a necklace, a silver pendant engraved with the Kingsley crest, a symbol known worldwide. Gasps turned into stunned silence. This, she said, was given to me by my father before he died. A gift no one can fake. Maxwell's face paled. His hands shook. Guests stared at him, then at Grace. Every phone was recording. Grace lowered the pendant. I didn't come here to brag, she said softly. I came because someone here tried to humiliate me. Someone who didn't know who I am. Someone who thought I had no power, no name, no past. She turned her eyes to Maxwell. But you made one mistake. You thought I was alone. Maxwell froze. The orchestra stopped playing. The room felt like a held breath. Grace looked toward the doors. You may come in now. And what happened next turned the party upside down. The ballroom doors opened again, but this time it wasn't waiters or musicians entering. It was three people who made Maxwell collapse into a chair. The first was Mary Ann Holloway, the most respected investigative journalist in the state. People gasped when they recognized her. She never attended parties, not unless something explosive was about to happen. The second was Jacob Reyes, a well-known lawyer who specialized in inheritance battles and fraud cases. The third was Dr. Samuel Ford, a retired medical examiner with silver hair and sad eyes, the same man who had worked on Charles Kingsley's autopsy decades ago. Maxwell's lips trembled. What is this? Grace spoke calmly. This is the truth you never expected to meet tonight. Mary Ann stepped forward. For the past year, Miss Milton has been working with me to uncover the illegal removal of her name from the Kingsley family registry. The room erupted in whispers. You hid the real daughter? This is crazy, Jacob added. We gathered proof that the Kingsley fortune was stolen from Evelyn Kingsley and her child. The documents were forged. The bank accounts were altered. Maxwell tried to stand, but his legs wobbled. What does this have to do with me? Dr. Ford looked at him with heavy eyes. Everything. Grace nodded to him gently. The doctor took a deep breath. I was forced to falsify information in Charles Kingsley's autopsy. More gasps. His death was ruled natural, Dr. Ford continued. But the truth is he was poisoned. The room exploded. Poisoned? By who? This is a movie, right? Maxwell shook his head violently. This is insane. Why bring this here? Why bring it to my house? Grace's voice was soft but sharp. Because the poison that killed my father came from the Hartfield Corporation medical labs. A scream echoed from somewhere in the back. Mary Ann opened her laptop and projected emails, files, and documents onto the big screen. Messages between lab workers. Transactions. Secret exchanges. Maxwell's name was everywhere. Maxwell's voice cracked. I didn't kill anyone. I didn't know. You didn't know. Jacob stepped forward. Then why did you authorize payment to silence Dr. Ford 20 years ago? No. Maxwell yelled, but Mary Ann played an audio recording. Maxwell's voice echoed. If you don't keep quiet, I will destroy your life. No one needs to know the old man was poisoned. Guests gasped. Some covered their mouths. Grace felt tears in her eyes, but they were not weak tears. They were tears of release. You knew exactly what happened, she whispered. You tried to bury the truth just like the Kingsley family tried to bury me. Maxwell tried to run, but two security officers, hired by Mary Ann, blocked the exit. And the night was far from over. Within moments, Mary Ann switched the screen to another folder. A folder titled Hartfield Crimes. Verified. And the room watched Maxwell's empire burn in real time. There were documents showing bribes to judges, blackmail messages sent to politicians, stolen charity money, illegal contracts, and evidence of millions laundered through fake companies. Marianne narrated everything clearly, her voice steady. Jacob explained the legal violations. Dr. Ford added details about the cover-up of Charles Kingsley's death. Grace stood silently in the center of the ballroom, the blue gown shimmering like a symbol of everything that had been stolen from her. And Maxwell fell apart piece by piece. He sweated. He sobbed. He tried to shout, but his voice cracked. His wife, Nora Hartfield, stood frozen. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Max, is it true?" He reached for her. "Nora, please, listen." She stepped back as if he were poison himself. "You ruined our children. You ruined our name. You ruined everything." Maxwell collapsed to the floor. "Grace, please. I didn't know it was your father. I didn't know." Grace looked at him with eyes full of truth. "Whether you knew or not doesn't change the fact you covered up a murder." Nora sobbed. "You're a monster." Maxwell grabbed Grace's dress hem like a drowning man grabbing onto a rope. "Please. Don't let them take me. You've already taken everything." Grace stepped back gently, freeing her gown from his hands. "I didn't take anything," she said calmly. "I reclaimed what belonged to my family." Marianne closed her laptop. "The police will be here in 3 minutes." Guests whispered. Some filmed. Some cried. Some hurried outside, afraid to be associated with Maxwell. The man who once stood like a king now looked like a broken shadow. His friends abandoned him. His wife backed away. His reputation lay shattered. Nora whispered to Grace, I never knew. I'm so sorry." Grace nodded softly. "You were lied to as well." And before the sirens arrived, the final truth broke the room open even wider. Jacob turned to the guests. "Miss Grace Milton is the legal and rightful heir to the entire Kingsley fortune. Every cent. Every estate. Every company. And the courts have already restored her inheritance." Guests gasped. Grace looked down, tears slipping quietly. "I never wanted wealth," she whispered. "I wanted truth." And in that moment, she became the most powerful person in the hall, not by force, but by dignity. The police stormed in minutes later. Cameras flashed. Reporters rushed through the gates. Maxwell Hartfield was handcuffed in front of everyone, screaming for mercy. But no one listened. Grace stood on the stairs watching him dragged away, the same stairs where he once mocked her. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't celebrating. She simply breathed, finally feeling the weight lift from her chest after so many years. The following months transformed everything. Newspapers exploded with headlines about Grace. Television stations called her the hidden heir. Social media crowned her the Queen of Justice. But Grace didn't want fame. She wanted change. She moved into the Kingsley main estate, a peaceful place she remembered from childhood, and turned it into something new. She rebuilt the company and created scholarships for underprivileged youth. She promoted workers who had been ignored for years. She opened shelters, funded schools, and hired diverse leaders to transform the company culture. Instead of the cold halls Charles Kingsley once ruled, Grace filled them with kindness. Jacob became her full-time lawyer. Marianne became her public advisor. Dr. Ford, finally free of guilt, became a medical consultant for her charity foundation. Nora Hartfield moved away with her children, but she wrote Grace a long letter thanking her for protecting the innocent. Grace never replied, but she kept the letter in a drawer to remind herself of compassion. People who once mocked Grace tried to befriend her. But she didn't let their sudden kindness fool her. She kept them at polite distance. "You didn't see my worth until you saw my power," she would say calmly. 6 months later, Grace stood on a stage during a global charity event. Cameras flashed, but she focused on the small group of children she had helped send to school. A journalist asked, "Do you think what you did to Maxwell was revenge?" Grace shook her head. "Revenge is when you hurt someone back," she said softly. "What I did was justice. Justice raises the truth. Revenge only lowers you." The audience went silent. Grace continued, "The best revenge is building a life so strong and good that no amount of cruelty can break you." She looked at the children again and whispered, "This is my real victory." Months later, on a quiet Sunday evening, Grace sat in her new home, one filled with warmth, books, soft music, and love. She had adopted 2 young children who had suffered through hardships like she once did. She helped them with homework, cooked dinner with them, and tucked them into bed with stories about courage and truth. That night, after the children slept, Grace walked onto the balcony where soft city lights shimmered in the distance. She held her mother's blue dress close to her heart. A soft breeze brushed her face, and she felt something she had never felt before, true peace. She whispered into the wind, "Mama, I hope I made you proud." As she looked out toward the world she now had the power to shape, she smiled. She no longer saw herself as the cleaning lady. She was Grace Kingsley, the daughter of a great man, the survivor of injustice, and the woman who turned pain into power. People would tell her story for years. Children would learn about her courage. And the Silverstone estate, where Maxwell once laughed, was now a symbol of how cruelty always collapses under the weight of truth. As Grace walked back inside, she whispered the final words that closed this chapter forever.